In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the strategical differences you should be using in your drafts when drafting a 10 archetype set compared to a 5 archetype set. Now, a 10 archetype set is one where all 10 two-color pairs are supported and draftable with build-around cards for them and cards that slot into that specific deck and themes for those decks. A 5 archetype set, by contrast, is one where only 5 of the 10 color pairs are supported with multicolored cards and themes and draftable archetypes. Now, sometimes there's off-meta decks in those 5 color sets, but generally you're going to be sticking to one of those 5 archetypes. And the way you should approach these drafts are very different, and the 3 main ways that they are going to differ are in how you prioritize monocolored cards, how you bias your picks based on what you already have, and how strongly you prioritize finding the open lane, which is somewhat connected to biasing your picks, but all things in draft are interconnected in many ways. And I want to talk about those differences today because 2026 has been a bit weird, where all of the sets so far have basically been 5 archetype sets. There's a little bit of support for off archetypes and Lorwyn Eclipse, but basically 5 archetype sets. And their general sets you're going to be playing are 10 archetype sets in most cases, at least historically. And the differences between these are significant, and how you should draft changes. And so I wanted to cover those as a bit of a refresher for people who haven't drafted these sets in a while, or new knowledge for those who are new to the game and haven't ever drafted a 10 colors pair set, or just extra strategical knowledge for those who want to get better at the game. So the first thing you need to change your priority of when drafting a 10 archetype set versus a 5 archetype set is how you prioritize monocolored cards. Now, a monocolored card would be something like a card that just costs blue mana to cast. A multicolored card is a card that would cast something like red blue to cast. And in a 10 color pair set, like, taking the monocolored cards is a lot better. So if you have a close pick pick one between a strong monocolored card like a blue card and a strong multicolored card like a blue-red card, taking the monocolored cards leaves you with a lot more options to play that card, and is generally going to mean that that is going to be the correct pick. So if they're close at all. So imagine you take the blue card, all of a sudden it can go into blue-red, blue-green, blue-black, or blue-white. You have 4 general homes for that deck, which is 4 of the 10 two-color pairs, and so that card is decently likely to make your final deck. And when you're making these draft picks, you're weighing the odds the card makes your final deck versus the power level of the card. If you are instead taking the red-blue card, all of a sudden it only fits into red-blue. You're not going to be able to play it in other homes. It's much less likely to make your final deck, and so you need to be like having a much higher power level to account for the fact that it's much less likely to make your deck. And these monocolored cards, a lot more of the power level is tied to them in 10 color pair sets, because they can't just have every card in the set be a multicolored card. A lot more power level has to go into these monocolored cards that are flexible across archetypes, because they are supporting so many different decks, and they don't want you to have like, okay, there are a lot of blue cards that only go into the one of the blue red, like only go into blue red, or you have to have these flexible power level cards. And so taking the monocolored card generally leaves you much more flexible going forward. Similarly, if you are biasing your picks, if you already have a blue card, biasing towards the blue card you already have is a lot more beneficial in a 10 color pair set, because a lot more of the power level that you're getting in a 10 color pair set is going to come from your early picks versus late picks. It's easy to kind of understand why. If a lot more of the power level is tied to these monocolored cards that any other player can use, now you can just imagine you're not going to be getting like 10th pick blue cards that are just insanely powerful. Versus if you were playing in a 5 archetype set and you're in an archetype that nobody else is really playing at the table, which it can definitely happen, because if there's 5 archetypes and 8 drafters, those don't divvy up evenly. You end up with a couple of drafters in 3 of the archetypes generally, and then 2 of the archetypes maybe only have 1 player drafting them each, or 1 player drafts a weird multicolored deck that kind of snipes cards from everybody. But generally you can benefit from being one of the only drafters drafting your 5 color your archetype in a 5 color pair set. And so 10th pick you could get a really good blue-red card, because the other blue drafters and the other red drafters can't use it. Versus if you're playing blue-red in a 10 color pair set, getting a strong mono blue card or a strong mono red card is less likely 10th pick, because you are not going to be seeing those as much, because other players can just slot them into their red-white deck or their blue-green deck or whatever. And so that's going to, because a lot more of the power level is tied to monocolored cards in 10 color pair sets, you need to be more willing to bias towards your early picks, because you're less likely to be getting like 12th pick really strong cards for your deck. Whereas in a 5 archetype set, it's really beneficial to do whatever you can to find the open lane, because if you do find the open lane, you can get really rewarded by getting these strong late picks, and you aren't going to have to suffer the fact that a lot of the power level is tied up into these multicolored cards that you can't potentially play if your archetype is getting cut, because your 2 players fighting over the same archetype isn't going to be leaving you with all these wide open cards. And so when you're making these drafts, I just wanted to give one more example when you're drafting of how biasing picks works. So if you have like a blue card, and then second pick, you have the choice between a blue card and a red card that's maybe slightly better, but like they're comparable. Taking the blue card leaves you more flexible because all of a sudden, both of those blue cards are really likely to make your deck, because the more blue cards you have, the more kind of pivot points you have. You can play blue-red, you can play blue-green. If you're very deep into one color, biasing towards that one color is really nice, because it just means that like all of those cards are getting higher and higher like likelihood of making your deck. And then if you find like a strong card or find like a little bit of a lane, then all of a sudden you can kind of pair those blue cards with anything. Whereas doing that in a 2-color set doesn't really work out as well, because if you're taking all these blue cards and then one of the 2 blue archetypes isn't open, you don't really get as rewarded for doing that. So it's much more beneficial to kind of jump around between the archetypes, take what power level you see, and then kind of be like, okay, 6th pick, 7th pick, and 8th pick, I got really good blue-red cards. Blue-red is probably where I'm supposed to be. Maybe I'm the only person drafting it. I can get a really good deck from this. And that's just kind of a general way of approaching these drafts a little bit differently. So to recap, monocolored cards go up in priority in 10 2-color pair sets. Biasing your picks towards the early cards that you have is more beneficial in 10 2 archetype sets. And finding the open lane, still beneficial, but it doesn't have to be like a perfectly open lane in a 10 archetype set. If you're playing like a blue-red deck and blue's a little bit contested, but you have like a really strong blue rare and red is wide open, that can still be a really good place to be, because you can just kind of pivot around the strong cards that you have a little bit more effectively in a 10 archetype set. So hopefully these tips are helpful to you. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you next time.